Hello, and welcome to the Beyond Performer console. This started as a passion project for myself, actually. Like about 2 years ago, I wanted to use color channels in the workspace so that we could basically change like colors in the workspace live. And I did that, but I started to play with it more and I started to do this, and I wanted a custom controller for this sort of thing. And last LDI, I brought it. It wasn't even finished programming, and there was a ton of interest. So through a year later, here we are. We have the unit. We have a whole bunch of them ready to ship out and be ready for you as customers. And so let's go ahead and dive in. And I'm going to show you all the cool functions in this, kind of how you use it, a little bit of setup, but the wiki has the exact step-by-step. We're going to basically look at the functions, kind of what was done, and then as one other thing is that we made a MIDI mapping webinar, which is a paid course, but if you buy the controller, you get it for free. So that'll show you how you kind of reconfigure things, where today we're going to kind of operate it as if we were doing it live. And this is kind of teaching you how to use this at a show. So the very first thing that matters is that there's 3 components that are really kind of relevant to the experience. And that is, there's an install, and the install that exists is on the wiki, but also inside the install, there is 3 things. There is the MIDI map, of course. There is a zone file, and there is this workspace. So this workspace called Lyra's Magical Color Changing Workspace. And the way that this works is basically, if I change the colors that are in my palettes here, then it updates the colors live of all the content. It also does this for all of our quick effects as well. So it's kind of like this master update. And so if you want that functionality to work, you're going to need the workspace. And the other thing is there's a zone file. So let's take a quick look at that zone file, projection zones here. The zone file is basically based around saturating an entire Beyond. So the way it works is there's 4 groups, A, B, C, and D, of 8 lasers. And there's also group A, these 0 zones. So in this case, the way that it works is left 1, 2, 3, 4, right 4, 3, 2, 1. So this is basically like there's 4 groups of lasers, and depending on what your setup is, you may use them in different ways. So if you kind of look at the preview, you can see that there's these 8 lasers up top, and then 4 and 4, 4 and 4, and then 8 again. So if you have, let's say, 16 fixtures, 16 lasers, you could potentially use group A and B if you wanted them to all be symmetrical out, or if you wanted them on top of each other to kind of be paired with each other on top of each other. You could do A and B. If you wanted the symmetricality, and our delays, of course, in Beyond is kind of individuals by default. But in theory, if you wanted to kind of have them be like matched, you could do A and D together, and that sort of thing. The other thing that this is relevant for is that when we look at some of our zone tools, they're colored the same way. If you don't need this zone file technically, and you could use your own zone file, and it's just based on index. So if you did like 8 zones and 8 zones or whatever, then it'll match those sorts of things. But everything in the workspace and everything whatever is kind of built automatically to be based around this zone file. So if you load in the default zone file and just match it to your lasers for whatever your install is, then you're going to be in good shape, and basically that's where you're going to want to start. So the zone file, of course, is important for zone tools. The workspace is important partially for the zone file and also the colors. And then, of course, you need the MIDI map. And the MIDI map will probably end up on the main installer, but for the sake of just having this super clean, useful install, we're going to maintain that install on the wiki page for the Performer console in general. So those are kind of the 3 components. If you don't want to use the colors and you want to use the default workspace colors, then you can just basically load in the default workspace. I did in this file that's in the zip folder is matched to those zone delays by default, so that should be fine. But if you want the colors, you just load in the Magical Color Changing Workspace. And like I said, you could use your own zone file too. The way that the zone tools work is based on zone index number. So as long as it's like 1 through 8 and you do kind of that numbering, you're going to be fine. So those are some of the different things that you may end up doing, like our flips that we have, for instance, which I just fixed. That stuff's based on zone index. So as long as you use the same kind of ordering, you can. And then on the wiki for the zone file, there's also a few examples of how you might arrange different sets of lasers and how you might do that. So that goes in depth there. So check out the wiki link, of course, where all the files and all that stuff exists. So you can kind of go from there. So now let's dive into actually the functionality of the controller. And the way that I laid this out is there's 4 layers. So in this case, there is some functionality on here that stays the same, and then some stuff that changes. So if I go from layer 1 to layer 2, you'll see that these LEDs change. Basically, this is our main grid. This is our second grid. So grid 1, grid 2. And then you have the aux encoders, and then the aux button panel. So those 4 kind of segments are the things that change on different layers. See that these change colors when we change the layers. These change colors based on what layer we're on. And then the 2 grids, of course. So let's start by looking at some of the things that don't change. Obviously, we have enable and disable in the top corner. We have a couple master buttons, the pause. There's a blackout button if you want to get rid of what's playing, and a physics button. So if you want to do physics objects, you can do physics and enable and disable that. Then we have the tempo section. So in this case, we have tap tempo, as we would need. We get a flash for the beat on the resync button, and then I can resync it. I can also half, of course, double, whatever the speed we want, half. We can get that tempo. So that's right there. Here's our UI buttons that you're going to use for content generally. So we have toggle, restart, and flash set here, 1Q, multi, and groups set up there. I set up basically this workspace to just be one group for kind of as a default. But if you use groups, then you know what you're going to need to do to change that and do what you want there. Plus page up and page down, of course, for this. The other thing is that I have colored, this is our grid. So this is the thing here. This is our Q grid as you'd expect from any MIDI controller, and I've also colored the horizontal rows to the workspace. So in this case, if you have red, it's the first row, second row, third, fourth, fifth row. And so that will help you kind of identify. You also see that whatever cue is selected is in orange, and whatever cue is playing is in white. So if I change the selection, you can see that that moves on the screen, changes there. And then this is the currently playing is when it is white. So that is how that generally works. So that's kind of what you'd expect these main cues here, and that's our grid, that's content as you'd go. So this is your main live effects area is what I would say. This is where your kind of traditional stuff is. So for instance, brightness, come on, that's obvious, scan rate. We also have visible points on here, as well as a saturation shift and a hue shift. So if we wanted to hue shift it here, these are just our live control parameters. So most of this stuff exists down in your live control tab. Most of these items are from down here. We also have this, so this is beam brush shift, and then this is brush value. So I don't have any brush fixtures up here, but you can see on the UI that if I push brush, I push brush. And then this brush shift value is basically like, if it's cranked to 0, it takes all brush values and brings them to 0. And then if it's at up from center, then it pushes all the brush values. So it's, if you're using brush content, you can kind of shift it down or shift it up depending on how much brush you want in that moment. These two little things is we have Q shift beat. So this is of course for delaying on the cue time. Let me just change the flips here so it looks a little more symmetrical and nice. So this is Q shift beat. This is that master item here, Q shift beat. You can see that this number's changed, and the faders are from 0 to 25. And so I can play with these values. This is kind of 0 to 0.25, sorry, 0.01 to 0.25, which is about as much as you're going to want for a setup like this. And so we can kind of play with those values here. This is Q shift, so that's the cue time. And then we also have effect shift. So if you're using something like a brightness effect from the quick effects, then I can use this effect time shift separately. So I can have cue time shift as well as effect time shift kind of running separately from each other. And so you can kind of use these together, separate, or as you see fit. So this is kind of that functionality. And then both of these on the faders are for beat, where on the knobs, they're actually for clock. So if you want to use clock-based cues, in this case, this is not a clock-based cue, or a clock-based quick effect, you could link them to these. And it's the same master kind of faders here. And you can see down effect time shift and cue time shift clock. It's just most live control things are done with beats because obviously we can do it with the tempo and it'll speed it up. So if you want to use those, you can. One thing to note about these encoders is that they're actually set to an accelerate mode. So they're digital encoders. And so what that means is if I go really slow on this encoder, you can see I'm slowly bringing up the value, and I can get an exact value on screen that I want. But also if I go really fast, and I go really fast on the encoder, then they go exactly where I want to. The other thing is if I click it, which I did accidentally, it resets that value on all of these here. So if I want to do like scan rate and I want to whip it into a flicker down and I want to reset it, I could do that. If I want to go nice and slow down into it, I can do that as well. And then the range on the scan rate, which I forgot to mention, is actually, I believe it's down to 5% and then all the way up to 120. So the defaults are always 200% on the APC40 that we had, which was not good. So now I've set it to 120, reset it. You can never forget it's pushing super far if you forgot to change your max scan rate on your projector settings. So one other thing to note, I suppose, of these delays is that you do need a pretty good computer to run this. We're running this on a desktop kind of computer right now for this demo. It's okay on a laptop if you got a good one, so you're probably fine. But it's just important to know this kind of like this plus this effect and all those other things together. A lot of this together does require a pretty good computer to make sure that it keeps up with it. So just something to note there. And then some pretty standard stuff. We got a size XY, that's zoom fader that you're used to. We got a Roto X move. This is what I like to use a lot. I think all the other ones are pretty not that interesting to me. So this is kind of a Roto Z move. I suppose if you didn't need these, you could do X, Y, and Z if you wanted to adjust it. But I really like the Roto Z move function there. For Q speed, we have the 0 to 100% kind of like master speed. This is technically animation speed. And then Q speed is from 0 to 400%. So if you want to go push it really fast and you don't want to play with tempo, you can do like 400% on the Q speed all the way down to 0%. And again, with the accelerated fader, I can have really fine values there and even use physics if I wanted to go between those. So if you want to play with 0 to 100, so that if you got a tempo tap in, but you want to like slow it down and then bring it back, this will allow you to go straight to 100, so you don't have to worry about being out of sync or whatever with your BPM, where if the fader was set to 0 to 400 and this was 0 to 100, it would be less nice. So fader 0 to 100, and then the knob is kind of 0 to 400% on the Q speed. So that's kind of our main effect layer. This doesn't change. You could, because these are in digital encoders, you could change it if you wanted, but these are the kinds of things I always want to play with as I'm changing color, if I'm changing zone tools. Like I'm probably going to be playing this musically, you know, whatever that ends up being. So I'm probably going to be doing that. In the bottom left, we have Q shift. So in the workspace also, I built a good few Q shifts. And so we basically have an amount of Q shift, and then we have our delay direction with our analog encoder. So these are digital encoders. These are just straight up analog. They have hard stops. They just go from 1 to 1. And Q shift, if you're not familiar, is basically a way of doing a live control parameter over your entire rig with delays. So in this case, I have a dimmer chase, and if I change the encoder value, it goes from being delayed one direction to being about in sync to delaying the other direction. So the way that this is set is to the right is towards the middle, and then towards the left is out from middle, and that's the same for all of these. So I have 4 brightness effects. So there's a pulse versus a sine wave, and then I have a very quick left to right kind of very fast chase, and then I have a kind of a tag out like this. So if I wanted to change the delay to, it'll kind of be together, but if I have groups of 4, then they're basically groups. Then I have an X oscillator, a Y oscillator, as well as a Roto Z oscillator, and a zoom oscillator. So if you want to play with either of those sorts of values, you can. And of course, you can update these as well. So I've just pre-built those. The other thing is, if you don't use Q shift, this is a great place to remap your own live effects. So if you want to have your own drop-in effects that you really like to play with, then there's 8 faders and 8 knobs here. You could remap that really easily. So I know some people who really don't, they didn't like how many buttons I had, and they wish there was more knobs and faders. Well, you can ditch these and have yourself a bunch of knobs and faders if you want, which works quite well. The next thing here is there's these analog encoders here. So the way this is set up is that there is 4 the FX action. So these are your quick effects rows 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's 2 rows per, and then so it's 16 wide. And then this is your FX action. So these are just FX actions. So if I wanted to have a color effect on here and I wanted to bring it in and out, I can do it with the FX action. And with this being on the same, like always here without layers, allows me to bring it out in effects from like, oh, I'm gonna break down or I need to slow down. I can rip you can pull out your effects really quickly that way. You won't have to jump to a different layer and figure out where it's coming from. So that's there. And then like I said, with like these dimmer effects, it's based, I have the effect shift based on here. So you can do all this stuff. It's good ways to use this. And so even if I have a delay on this sort of a brightness effect or whatever, then I can FX action it out. And so you can do stuff like that, which is quite nice. So you could remap this where it's 8 by 8, and you could change these 4 from channels, which we'll talk about in a second, to FX action 1 through 8. That's an option. I've kind of decided that this looks better because on most screens, on most people's laptops and stuff, 8 by 8 grid on the quick effects just kind of looks weird. So I decided to stick with this for now, but that's something you could change. These channels, what I've done is I've mapped them to parameters inside of our effects. So let's say I put on something like this color scroll and simple line, and then let's put in this effect. On channel 1, I have mapped repeats for things. So I have repeats on control. And then similarly, if I were to do a brightness effect like this, I have on channel 2, the repeats for channel 2. So I've kind of left channels 1 through 4 because I know a lot of people map these to certain things, whether they use it for a zone flip. So channels 1, 2, 3, 4 are locked in here. I have put it in the default workspace to like effect parameters be based to the first 2 channels, and then 3 and 4 are left open. So if you have like a zone flip and you like to do it that way, we'll talk about some other ways too in a minute, but if you like to do it that way, these are here, and it doesn't matter what layer they're on, they're always active, they're usable there. So FX grid, FX action, and channels, which have some submaster aspect to them with the repeats. And then the last thing on this page that does change is the aux encoders here. So these are, on page 1, they are set to size XY, and I have this locked on the here, so these kind of go together. And then position X and position Y. And of course I can reset them as I see fit. And this is just for the geometric position that exists in the live control tab. So like I said, a few things stay the same on layer 1, 2, 3, and 4, BPM, kind of live controls, master stuff, these faders and that sort of thing. But stuff that can LED change, a lot of it does change. So let's go to layer 2. And layer 2, now we have color. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna select a piece of content. We'll go to waves and let's do 3. That one's good. I like this one. So colors, layer 2 is colors. So as I was mentioning early at the beginning, we basically have mapped every single piece of content to color channels 1 through 4. I use some rules. You can check the wiki for the actual rules and kind of suggestions based on that. But there's a few particulars. And so what we have here is this color palette is actually what is set here. If I change them to one of these preset palettes like this, you're gonna see the queue changes to these different color palettes. So if I run this one or this one, it'll update the content entirely. It updates the content itself. It updates any effects that are being linked. You can kind of see inside of our quick effects that it's done this way. And so these are presets. These are kind of patterns. These are ones that I built, but there's in the MIDI mapping webinar that talks about how to modify this. I show you how to change these so you can make them for yourself. But I also have live controls here. So in my second grid here, the grid 2, these are color channels 1, 2, 3, and 4. And each one of these is each value of 30 degrees of hue. So we basically red, orange, yellow, lime, green, clover, all those sorts of 30-degree hues that you expect, as well as black. So if you wanted to do, you could have the color channels be black. And then of course we have also warm white, white, and cool white. And so you might be able to see a little bit there. It depends on the color tune, of course, of your projector, but your full white is going to be this one. And so you can do individual ones. So if you want to I'm just going to live pick a palette, I can live pick a palette. If a LD springs a weird color palette on you out of nowhere, you can build yourself that live color palette immediately. It changes your quick effects, it changes your content, it updates everywhere, just super awesome. We also have some color presets here. So if I press this, you can see it's color plus white. So all of these are color plus white. So whatever that color is, also black plus white, and then our 3 colors there. And obviously since they're white, I just have those. So these are basically masters. And then also, if you click these, red, green, blue, white, and then these 3 is yellow, cyan, magenta, excuse me. So you can kind of do those presets, and then if you're in any layer, because now I don't have color control, I can always dump to red, green, blue, or white. And of course you could adjust this if you want, but you can always dump out of a color, or take your saturation out and be white, or override a color. So there's many ways you can override, even though most of your color tools are on layer 2. There's a number of ways to go about adjusting those colors in real time, no matter what layer you happen to be on. Also in this layer is these 2 rows. You see that they're cyan and they're green. And if we look here, we can see that we're matching to our Q shift and our effect shift. So this is Q shift beat and this is effect shift beat. And they're basically really common increments. So this is 0 to reset them, 0.01, 0.03, 0.06, 0.12, 0.25, which is the slider max, 0.5, this is 0.33, which is a weird one, 1.0, 2.0, and 4.0. So, and that's the same for the effect shift as well. These are basically just set values instead of using the fader or the knob. So if you want to dump into a value that you already like, you can dump into a specific value quickly from here as well. So we put those in. And then our encoder bar, our aux encoders up here, is RGBA panel. So from our live control tab, we have RGBA, which just happens to be an extra control layer that you would expect. So if I want to control the RGBA panel, I can control it here. If I want to do the alpha to override, so if I want to have a little bit of, pasteurize it, whatever that would mean. So you could do that there. So individual colors, colors plus white, preset palettes, and overrides, and RGBA panel. So that's layer 2. Everything else, as we mentioned, stays the same. Okay, let's move on to layer 3. Layer 3 is zone tools. So very first thing I want to mention is that I left open the aux button panel with nothing on it. And that allows you to, if you want to make your own flips, you want to make your own preset zone groups, you could use these buttons to do that. I've already kind of saturated what I would do in here, but I know I'm never going to have exactly the same ideas as you are. So of course, I left these open for you to do it. And then for our aux encoders, we actually have channels 5, 6, 7, and 8. So if you want to tie in these to like zone flipping, you can do that because you can kind of set the value, and when you leave and come back, you can control those numbers as you see fit. So that's important to kind of note, and if you want to do your zone-based stuff, maybe this is the right place to do it. So let's talk about our 2 grids. First is individual zone selection. So if you remember from our workspace, or from our zone file that I gave you, there's 4 groups, A, B, C, and D, and they are colored orange. This is clover, aqua, and purple, and they are also colored that way in the zone file, like so. And it's 1 through 8, so L1, L2, L3, L4 are 4, 3, 2, and 1, and they all work that way. And I'm sticking kind of house left in this case, but you could in theory do it stage left and stage right if you wanted to. None of the math really changes. And then we also have our 0 zones. So if this with the 8 groups of 8 is 32 lasers, but if you want to saturate beyond entirely to be 40 fixtures entirely, then you need to use this row as well. And so these are the 0 zones. Now, mathematically, musically, multiples of 4 because of beats makes tons of sense, where multiples of 5 don't really make sense. So I encourage you to stick to groups of 8 if you can, but if you have to saturate it because you want to do 40 lasers on 1 beyond, you can do that here. So what these are is they're individual zone selections. So once you're familiar with this setup here, you can have them like this. And if I select individual fixtures, like so, I go back to layer 1 and I select the content, it's going to take those exact zones that I did. And then if I do something like multi-Q and I go back to layer 3 and I do some other selection and I put content, I can start to build groups out of this. So you can see that I can build basically selections, I can do whatever. I ended up taking kind of similar zones to each other, but you can do stuff like that, which is really interesting. But these are basically individual zone selections. So that's something to keep in mind. So we can basically do that. Now, if I want to reset my selection, because I still happen to have that selection done, I can reset my selection. Once I reload the content, it's going to take the default workspace selections. So if I wanted to do, let's say, I could do all of those, and if I do that order, then I'll have that delay order make sense. And I did, let's say, this queue. Zones, reset selection, do group B, go back to content, pick something else, it'll take those. And if I use multi-queue, then I could have them both at the same time. So this is how you can kind of use the zone selections here to basically do what you want to do and build that sort of lookout and do that sort of thing. So let's go back to zones. We're going to reset our selection, and then we just need to update the content selection. And again, I'll go back to the order that is in the queue, which is the delay direction that you would all want. So that's individual zone selection. This is also your also to zones. So if you don't want delays to work, you can do the also to zones for group A, B, C, D, as well as everything. So if you don't want any delays to happen no matter what, you can select the all also to zone. Here we have a couple things. So in orange, we have our flips. So if we take a look at the lasers or we take a look at the screen, I can do directionality. And I also get a little preview window that pops up for just a second to kind of tell you what it's going. So this is out flip, this is in flip symmetrical. This is one way linear, this is the other way linear. This is every other one way, every other the other way, every two, every two, every four, every four. So these are some preset flips that you can do. I love to live in just symmetrical in, but again, if you want to do every other, for instance, which is also a kind of a nice look, you can play with those there, and that's what these ones are for. These ones are for selection directionality. So right now it's basically center out based on my preview. But let's go ahead and let's pick a different queue that looks really good delayed. So I'm looking at this one, there we go. I could either do it, of course, by going to layer 1, or I could just do it with my touchscreen. So let's go with this, and so we can see this delay here. So this is a really nice delayed queue, but you can see it's symmetrical out. So what I can do is I can change the directionality. So let's click this one, it says it's clockwise. When I refresh the queue, my delay is now clockwise. If I click this, it says counterclockwise, refresh the queue, I'm going counterclockwise. Let's see what else we have. Vertical, from bottom to top. Vertical top to bottom. So you can see how I can change the selection order of them and get a new selection. And so what you can do is take these codes and place them on these buttons in the MIDI map and make your own delay orders as you see fit. But this is like a super really pre-built, I built kind of top to bottom. I think I have some diagonals, which is really nice too. Let's see. Group mirror, so yeah, this is like all the groups individually. This is the stock full mirror selection. So I have basically some preset, yeah, this is a diagonal one. So there's some cool selections there. In pink, I have smaller selections. So this one was rig left linear. This one was rig right linear. This one was top. And the reason these ones do this is because they're actually selections. So I would want to make sure I reset my selection, where these ones are kind of resets the grouping order. These ones are selections. And then this is group A, I believe. No, this is L1s. This is L2s. Now I have both of them. You can see how I'm adding to them as I go. And then group Bs. So these are different ways you might do selections. And then these are group A linear. So if I want to do group 1A, group B linear, now they're both selected. So you can see how we're editing them one. And then for these to go away, I just want to press the reset button so that whenever I press content again, it goes back to the default workspace destination orders. So there's a lot there. There's a lot you can play with and kind of get used to these delays and playing with these delays. And all I did was show you one queue with different directionalities with one single delay amount. So all of your effects, whether it's color or it's your brightness effects, will work as well with this selection. So these are really powerful in ways that you can go ahead and use that. So play with this, you're gonna love it. I'm sure you will love it. Okay, so I can make sure my selection's reset. We're now using the default workspace selection, so I'm cool with that. We can take the delay out. So that is layer 3, lots of zone stuff. Layer 4, finally, we're on the last layer, is what I call content 2. On your grid over here, your little grid, your grid 2, What it does is it bakes your keys pages. So page 1 in your workspace is baked here. So that's why it's 8 by 8 by default in your in the file. But it gives me live control, like I want to play keys. So if I know the song, I'm like, it's Sandstorm. I know Sandstorm. Everyone knows Sandstorm. You can play them here. And then this is your workspace 2. So in Beyond, you have this lower tab area with the second workspace. What you might want to do is set this to fans of beams. You can set this top one here to, let's say, waves 2, which we were in. And I could have a wave here. I could go straight into beams on this one. I could go with my keys on top, or whatever. So I have keys, secondary workspace, and I could touch this. So you can see how there's like a lot of ways to have content ready to be selected. And if you kind of use a touchscreen like this, you really have 3 grids. In Content 2, you have 3 grids at your disposal. So you can dump in however you see fit. And down here in the aux button panel, we just have our UI buttons for the secondary grid. So if you want to do, again, toggle restart flash, you have those. And also page up down for the secondary grid. So if you're like, I want to swap the hot beams, I can swap the hot beams on this one. These 4 encoders, the aux encoders, are DMX channels 1 through 4. So if you want to do haze on these, you want to do a little area lighting, you can use these for DMX out as well. You also notice on layer 1, these 2 stay here, and that is because these also are available for page 2 on your main grid. So if you wanted to use that as a touchscreen and this is your main content area, you could do that as well. And I think that is it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that you can play with. I want it to be really approachable, so if you really just wanted to do content and effects and stuff on layer 1, load in whatever workspace you want, load in whatever zone file, and you can live here just fine without even using the other install. Just grab the MIDI map and you'd be good to go. Then maybe add some color. Maybe on your own workspace, you start setting those color channels. You can add color. Maybe you want to add a zone file. You build your own zone file around this. Whatever, you can add that. And then you want to go crazy with tons of different types of content, you can jump into it. So you can grow into this as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's just a MIDI controller, all things considered. Like it comes down to, it's just a MIDI controller. And because you bought this, you have free access to that MIDI webinar, and you can watch the video that shows you how to modify this. So if you love the layout but hate my map, then you can do whatever you want with it afterwards. So again, thank you very much for either considering to purchase this or purchasing this, and I hope you enjoy using it on all of your shows that you get to busk.